"If he can play this piano, I'll give him my company," laughed the businessman until Richard Blackwell was having the worst day of his business life when the little mineral water delivery boy entered the 23rd floor conference room. The boy, of about 8 years old, with his dark skin and curly hair, struggled to carry the heavy jugs that seemed larger than himself. "Watch out for that piano, kid," shouted Richard, upon seeing the child dangerously approach the $500,000 instrument that dominated one corner of the room. The boy stopped immediately, his eyes wide with fear, but it was too late. While trying to avoid it, one of the water cart's wheels hit the side of the grand piano, producing a sharp sound that echoed through the room full of executives. Richard felt the blood rush to his head. He had already lost 2 important contracts that morning, and now this situation. "Look what you've done," he yelled, pointing his finger at the boy who began to tremble. "Do you know how much this piano costs? More than you'll earn in your entire life." The 15 executives present at the meeting were embarrassed by their boss's disproportionate reaction. The boy, wearing a faded beige t-shirt and worn-out sneakers, tried to wipe the small mark he had left on the varnish with his shirt sleeve. "Sorry, Mr. Richard, I didn't mean to," he murmured with a trembling voice. "Didn't mean to? Well, you should have been more careful," Richard continued, shouting, completely losing control. "I bet you don't even know what a real piano is." The room fell silent. Everyone knew Richard's explosive temper, especially when he was under pressure, but this was going too far. The boy lowered his head, tears beginning to form in his dark eyes. It was then that Richard, still blind with rage, uttered the words that would change his life forever. "If this kid can play a song on this piano, I'll give him my entire company." The laughter that came out of his mouth echoed through the room like a cruel thunderclap. The executives exchanged uncomfortable glances, some starting to discreetly film with their cell phones, sensing that something memorable was about to happen. The boy slowly raised his head, his eyes still moist but with a different gleam. I know how to play," he whispered so softly that Richard almost didn't hear. "What?" Richard stopped laughing abruptly. "I know how to play piano," repeated the boy, this time with more firmness in his voice. Richard's reaction was explosive. He doubled over, holding his stomach, and burst into even louder and crueler laughter. "Did you hear that? This brat thinks he knows how to play piano." He pointed at the boy while the executives grew increasingly uncomfortable. "Go ahead then, maestro. Show us what you're capable of." The boy looked at the piano, then at Richard, and slowly walked to the bench. His small hands barely reached the keys comfortably, but he positioned himself with a surprisingly correct posture. What happened in the following minutes would leave Richard Blackwell questioning everything he believed about life. The first notes that came from the piano were hesitant, as if the child were testing the instrument. But soon the hesitation gave way to something completely unexpected. The melody that began to flow from the small hands was complex, technically perfect, and emotionally profound. Richard stopped laughing. In fact, he stopped breathing. The boy was playing Beethoven's Für Elise, not the simplified version that beginners learn, but the complete and original composition. Each note sounded crystal clear, each musical phrase constructed with a maturity that defied the young pianist's age. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The room was in complete silence, except for the magical notes dancing through the air. The executives had stopped using their cell phones to really pay attention to the prodigy unfolding before them. Some had tears in their eyes. Richard Blackwell felt as if the ground was opening beneath his feet. That boy, whom just minutes ago he had publicly humiliated, was demonstrating a talent he could never have imagined. And even worse, he was doing it on his own piano, in his own company, in front of all his employees. When the boy finished for release, the silence remained for a few eternal seconds. Then, without pause, he began a new piece. This time, Richard recognized it immediately. It was Moonlight Sonata, also by Beethoven, but performed with an interpretation that would make professional pianists envious. "My God," murmured Jennifer, Richard's executive secretary, who had entered the room during the performance. "Where did this boy learn to play like that?" Richard couldn't answer. His mind was a whirlwind of contradictory thoughts. How was it possible? Where did that talent come from? And most importantly, what would he do now with the stupid promise he had made in front of 15 witnesses? The boy continued playing for another 15 minutes, alternating between classical pieces and some more popular melodies, all performed with the same impressive mastery. When he finally stopped, he placed his hands on his lap and looked timidly at Richard. It was nice to play on a real piano, he said in his still childlike voice, contrasting dramatically with the musical maturity he had just demonstrated. Richard swallowed hard. Everyone in the room was looking at him, waiting for a reaction. Some people had already posted videos on social media, and he could see notifications coming in on their cell phones. How did you learn to play like that? He managed to ask, his voice hoarse and different. The boy lowered his head again, as if he had done something wrong. My grandma taught me some things, but she can't play anymore because of the problem with her hands. So I watch videos on YouTube and try to imitate. Your grandmother? Yeah. She used to live in a big house before, had a piano just like this one. But now we live in a small house and there's no piano. Sometimes I draw the keys on paper and pretend I'm playing. Richard felt a tightness in his chest that he couldn't explain. Beside him, Jennifer had approached and whispered, "Richard, you promised in front of everyone. This is already on the internet." He pulled out his cell phone and saw that there were already dozens of shares of the video. The title of one of the posts said, "Businessman promises to give company to child who plays piano. You won't believe what happens." "What's your name, kid?" asked Richard, trying to buy time to think. "Marcus, sir. Marcus Williams." "And where do you live, Marcus?" "In the South Bronx, sir. I live with my grandma Margaret and my mother." Richard knew the South Bronx, one of the most deprived outskirts of New York City. The distance between that world and his office in the city center seemed like light years. "And your mother? What does she do?" Marcus hesitated before answering, as if he were ashamed. "She works as a cleaner at night. And during the day she sells candy at the traffic light near home." The silence in the room was deafening. Richard looked at the executives around him, all clearly moved by the situation. Some already had tears in their eyes. He himself felt a strange emotion growing in his chest, something he hadn't felt in years. "And you, how did you get here?" "I work at the water company. I help Uncle Joe carry the heavy jugs. He pays me $5 a day when there's a lot of work." Richard quickly did the math in his head. $5 a day when there was work. The boy probably made at most $100 a month if he was lucky. "How old are you, Marcus?" "8, sir. I'll be 9 next month." 8 years old, the same age his own son had been when... Richard quickly pushed away that painful memory. This wasn't the time for that. "Richard," Jennifer approached him and whispered in his ear, "we need to talk. In private." He nodded and addressed the executives. "Let's take a 15-minute break. Marcus, you can stay here if you want. You can play the piano as much as you like." The boy's eyes lit up as if it were Christmas. "Really, I can." "Yes, you can." Richard and Jennifer left the room, leaving Marcus enchanted with the piano and the executives still processing what they had just witnessed. In the hallway, Jennifer didn't waste any time. "Richard, you have to keep your promise." "Are you crazy, Jennifer? How can I give my company to an 8-year-old kid? You said it in front of everyone. It's already on the internet. If you don't do something, your reputation will be ruined by tomorrow." Richard ran his hands through his hair, trying to think. His company was worth millions of dollars. It was the result of 20 years of hard work, enormous sacrifices, sleepless nights building what he had today. "Besides," Jennifer continued, "you saw how that boy plays. He's a prodigy, Richard. Talent like that comes along once in a generation." "But what if it's all an act? What if someone trained him to do this?" "Richard, for God's sake, look into that child's eyes. Do you think he's faking it? And even if he were, the talent is real. You heard the music that came from that piano." Richard knew Jennifer was right. The boy's talent was undeniably real. But hand over his company? It was impossible. "Let's go back," he said finally. "I need to think of something." When they returned to the room, they found Marcus playing a piece of music that Richard didn't recognize, but that was equally beautiful and complex. The executives were all recording again, clearly impressed. "Marcus," Richard approached the piano, "this music you were just playing, where did you learn it?" The boy stopped playing and looked at him with innocence. "I made it up, sir. Sometimes I create music in my head when I'm sad or feeling homesick." Richard felt the world spin. The boy not only played like a virtuoso, but also composed his own music, at 8 years old. "Homesick for what, Marcus?" "For my father. He left when I was little. My mom says he had to work far away, but I think he didn't like us." Richard closed his eyes. The boy's story was becoming more and more touching, and he felt increasingly guilty for his initial reaction. "Marcus, about what I said before, about giving you my company." The boy quickly interrupted him. "You don't have to, Mr. Richard. I don't want your company. I wouldn't even know what to do with it." "You don't want it?" "No, sir. I just wanted—" He hesitated, as if he were asking for too much. "I just wanted to be able to play a real piano sometimes. The paper one I draw at home doesn't make any sound." Richard felt as if he'd been punched in the stomach. Here was an 8-year-old child with extraordinary talent who had just been offered a company worth millions, and all he wanted was to be able to play the piano. It was at that moment that his cell phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Hello? Mr. Richard Blackwell, this is Maestro Anthony Harrington." Richard almost dropped the phone. Anthony Harrington was the most respected conductor in the United States, the director of the New York Philharmonic. "Maestro Harrington, how did you get my number?" "Mr. Richard, I'm calling because I just saw a video on social media of a child playing the piano in your office. This boy, where did you find him? He works delivering water here in the building. Mr. Richard, I need to speak with this child in person. What I saw in the video is simply extraordinary. In 40 years of my career, I've never seen anything like it in someone so young." Richard looked at Marcus, who had resumed playing and was completely absorbed in the music. "Maestro, could you come here? I'm leaving now. I'll be there in an hour." Richard hung up the phone and looked at Jennifer, who had heard the entire conversation. "Maestro Harrington wants to meet Marcus," he said, still not believing it. "Richard, do you realize what's happening here?" Jennifer whispered. "This boy isn't just talented. He's a world-class prodigy." Meanwhile, other cell phones in the room began to ring. The videos of Marcus playing were going viral quickly, and influential people were starting to take notice of what was happening in Richard Blackwell's office. "Mr. Richard," called David, one of the executives, "I just got a call from NBC. They want to do a story on Marcus." "And I got one from CBS," said another executive. Richard felt as if he were losing control of the situation. What had started as a moment of anger was turning into a national event. "Marcus," he approached the boy again, "you need to stop playing for a moment. We have to talk about something important." The boy stopped immediately and placed his hands on his lap. "Did I do something wrong, Mr. Richard?" "No, Marcus, on the contrary. You played so well that many important people want to meet you, including a very famous maestro who will be here shortly." Marcus's eyes widened. "A maestro? For real?" "For real. But first, I need to ask you something. Where is your mother right now?" "She's probably working at Mrs. Cynthia's house. She cleans there every Monday." "Do you have her phone number?" "I have Mrs. Cynthia's number." Richard took the secretary's phone and dialed the number Marcus dictated. After a few minutes, he managed to speak with Tanya, the boy's mother. "Mrs. Tanya, this is Richard Blackwell from the company where your son Marcus works." "No, ma'am, he didn't do anything wrong. Quite the opposite. Could you come here? It's very important." "No, it's no trouble at all. In fact, it might be the best thing that's ever happened in Marcus's life." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. While they waited for Marcus's mother and Maestro Harrington to arrive, Richard tried to process everything that was happening. His morning had begun with 2 lost contracts and a disproportionate angry outburst at an innocent child. Now, just a few hours later, he was at the center of a viral phenomenon that was capturing the attention of the entire country. "Marcus," he said, sitting next to the boy on the piano bench, "tell me more about your grandmother. Did she really teach you to play?" Marcus nodded, his eyes shining as he spoke about his grandmother. Grandma Margaret was very famous back in the day. She played piano at the church, at weddings, and even at a music school. But after she hurt her hands at work, she can't play properly anymore. How did she hurt her hands? She worked in a factory and had an accident with a machine. Her fingers got stiff. She says they hurt a lot when she tries to play. Richard felt a tightness in his chest. How many sad stories were there behind those faces he saw every day on the streets, but never truly saw? And she taught you everything you know. Not everything, no. She taught me the basics when I was very little, but then she couldn't anymore, so I would watch videos on the internet when I had money to pay for the cafe with Wi-Fi near home. Coffee with Wi-Fi? Yes, sir. We don't have internet at home. Sometimes when I save up some change, I go to Mr. Raymond's cafe and stay there watching piano videos on YouTube. Mr. Raymond is nice. Sometimes he lets me stay longer even when the money runs out. Richard did another quick calculation. The boy saved money from the $5 he earned helping deliver water to pay for internet at a cafe, just to be able to watch piano videos. The dedication was impressive. And you can learn just by watching the videos? Yes, sir. I pay attention to where the person's fingers go, and then I go home and draw the piano on paper. Then I pretend I'm playing until I memorize it. When I go back to the cafe, I watch again to see if I got it right. Richard was beginning to understand the dimension of the prodigy he had before him. It wasn't just Marcus's natural talent, but also his determination and dedication that were impressive. "Marcus, can I ask you a personal question?" "Of course, Mr. Blackwell." "Why do you like playing the piano so much?" Marcus thought for a moment before answering, as if searching for the right words. "When I play the piano, or even when I pretend to play on paper, I forget that we don't have money. I forget that my mom works until very late and comes home tired. I forget that sometimes there's no food in the fridge. It's like I become a different person." Richard closed his eyes. The boy's answer had struck a deep chord in his heart, a place he had locked away long ago. Just then, the living room door opened and a black woman, about 35 years old, entered hurriedly and worriedly. Her clothes were simple but clean, and she had the tired face of someone who works hard every day. "Marcus," she ran to her son and hugged him. "My son, what happened? You said on the phone that—" "Mom, I played the piano," Marcus interrupted, excited. "And it was a real piano, just like Grandma had." Tanya looked confused at Richard. "Mr. Blackwell, I didn't quite understand what you said on the phone. Did Marcus do something he shouldn't have?" "On the contrary, Mrs. Williams, your son gave us one of the greatest lessons of our lives." Richard then told everything that had happened, from his initial reaction to the moment when Marcus had played. As the story unfolded, Tanya's face alternated between surprise, pride, and worry. "My God," she whispered at the end. "Marcus, is this true?" "Yes, Mom. And now a famous maestro is coming here to meet me." Tanya looked at Richard with tears in her eyes. "Mr. Blackwell, I don't know what to say. I always knew Marcus had talent. My mother-in-law always said that. But I never imagined that." "Mrs. Williams," Richard interrupted, "I need to ask you something. Did you know that Marcus was working here?" Tanya lowered her head, ashamed. "Yes, sir. I work overnight, and Marcus stays with my mother-in-law during the day. But she is very sick, so sometimes he comes to help Joe to earn some change. I know it's not right for a child to work, but—" "You don't need to explain, ma'am," Richard said kindly. "I understand." In fact, Richard was beginning to understand many things. He was understanding what life was like for those people, so different from his own reality. He was understanding the value of every dollar earned with so much effort, and most of all, he was understanding how unfair and cruel he had been to Marcus at the beginning of that morning. It was at that moment that the door opened again, and a tall man with graying hair, wearing an elegant suit, entered. It was Maestro Anthony Harrington. "Mr. Blackwell," He introduced himself with the distinctive voice Richard had heard so many times at concerts. "I'm Anthony Harrington." "Maestro, thank you so much for coming. This is Marcus, the boy from the video." Harrington looked at Marcus, who was hugging his mother next to the piano, and his experienced eyes sparkled. "So you're the little prodigy," he said, approaching. "Marcus, isn't it?" "Yes, sir," Marcus replied timidly. "May I ask you to play something for me?" Marcus looked at his mother, who nodded encouragingly. "Yes, sir." Marcus sat down again at the piano, and this time chose a piece that Richard hadn't heard before. It was a melancholic and beautiful composition, played with a sensitivity that left everyone in the room in absolute silence. Maestro Harrington remained motionless throughout the performance, just watching Marcus's small hands dance over the keys with impressive precision. When Marcus finished, Harrington stayed silent for a few seconds before speaking. "In 40 years of career," he said slowly, "I've seen many extraordinary talents, but what I just witnessed..." He paused. "This isn't just talent, it's a divine gift." Tanya began to cry, covering her face with her hands. "Marcus," the maestro continued, "did you compose that music you just played?" "Yes, sir, I did. I make up a lot of music." "How many pieces have you composed?" Marcus thought for a moment. "I think about 20 or 30, but only in my head. I don't know how to write them down on paper." Harrington turned to Richard. "Mr. Blackwell, I need to speak with you in private. It's about this child's future." They left the room, leaving Marcus with his mother and the executives, who remained impressed with everything they were witnessing. In the hallway, Harrington didn't waste any time. "Mr. Blackwell, this boy needs professional music education immediately. Every day that passes without proper instruction is a waste of a talent that appears once in a century." "Maestro, I understand, but the family's financial situation..." "That's exactly what I want to talk about. I'm willing to give Marcus private lessons for free. Besides, I know several institutions that would be interested in sponsoring his music education." Richard was surprised by the generous offer. "You would do that?" "Mr. Blackwell, preserving a talent like this is a responsibility for all of us who love music, but there is a problem." "What?" "Marcus needs a piano to practice at home. It's not possible to develop talent of this level with just lessons once a week. He needs to play every day." Richard thought about what Harrington was saying. A decent piano cost at least $15,000, money that Marcus's family would never have. "And there's another thing," the maestro continued. "Formal music education is expensive. Lessons in music theory, harmony, composition. Even with my help, the costs would be too high for the family." Richard thought back to the promise he had made impulsively. Giving his company to a child was impossible, but there were other ways to fulfill his commitment. "Maestro, what if I funded all of Marcus's music education?" "That would be wonderful, but what if I bought a piano for him?" "Mr. Blackwell, that would be fantastic, but I'm afraid it wouldn't be enough." "Why?" "Because a talent like Marcus's can't be wasted on kids' jobs. He needs to dedicate himself fully to his studies and music, and that means the family will need financial support to survive without the income the boy brings home." Richard was beginning to understand the complexity of the situation. It wasn't enough to pay for a piano and some lessons. A much bigger commitment was necessary. "Maestro, do you believe Marcus has the potential to become a professional pianist?" "Mr. Blackwell, Marcus doesn't have the potential to become a professional pianist. He already is a professional pianist. At 8 years old, he has a technique and musicality that many adults never achieve. With the proper education, he could become one of the world's great pianists." Richard felt a shiver. The responsibility unfolding before him was enormous. "What do you suggest I do?" "If you truly want to help Marcus, you need to think about long-term support. We're talking about at least 10 years of intensive music education before he can support himself professionally." 10 years. Yes. And during those 10 years, the family will need financial support, so Marcus can dedicate himself exclusively to studies and music. Richard did the math in his head. 10 years of high-level music education, plus financial support for the family, plus a decent piano. He was talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, but then he remembered the words he had spoken before everyone. If this kid can play a song on this piano, I'll give him my entire company. The amount he was calculating was high, but still just a fraction of what his company was worth. And more important than that, it was the chance to transform the life of an exceptional child. Maestro, let's go back inside. I need to speak with Marcus and his mother. When they returned to the room, they found a touching scene. Marcus was playing a soft melody while his mother cried emotionally beside the piano. The executives kept filming, but now with reverent respect for what they were witnessing. "Marcus, can you stop for a moment?" asked Richard. "I need to speak with you and your mother about something very important." Marcus stopped playing and joined his mother. "Marcus," Richard began, "do you remember what I said at the beginning about giving you my company if you could play piano?" "Yes, sir, I remember, but I already said I don't want your company." "I know, Marcus, but a promise is a promise, and I always keep my promises." Tanya looked worried. "Mr. Richard, Marcus is just a child. He can't have a company." "Mrs. Tanya, you're right. A child can't run a company, but I can do something else." Richard took a deep breath before continuing. "Marcus, Mrs. Tanya, I just spoke with Maestro Harrington. He believes you have extraordinary talent, Marcus. But to develop that talent, you'll need to study music seriously." "I want to study, Mr. Richard." "I know you do. That's why I'll do this. Instead of giving you my company, I'll create a music education fund in your name. This fund will pay for all your music lessons for the next 10 years, will buy a piano for you to practice at home, and will provide financial assistance for your family so you can dedicate yourself fully to your studies." The silence in the room was absolute. Tanya's mouth hung open, unable to believe what she was hearing. "Mr. Richard," she whispered, "are you serious?" "Completely serious, Mrs. Tanya. Marcus earned this with his talent and dedication. But how much money would that be?" "Don't worry about that. I'll allocate a portion of my company's profits specifically for Marcus's education." Marcus jumped from the chair and ran to hug Richard. "Thank you so much, Mr. Richard. Thank you so much." Richard felt his eyes filling with tears as he hugged the boy. It had been a long time since he'd felt so good about himself. "Marcus," said Maestro Harrington, "this means you'll be able to study music properly. You'll learn to read sheet music. You'll get to know all the great composers. You'll learn music theory." "And I'll get to play on a real piano every day?" asked Marcus, excited. "Every day," confirmed Richard. "And will my mom not have to work so hard anymore?" "Your mother will be able to work less and take better care of you and your grandmother." Marcus turned to his mother. "Mom, did you hear that? I'll be able to study music for real." Tanya couldn't stop crying. "My son. My boy." That's when Jennifer approached Richard. "Richard, there's one more thing. Marcus's videos already have over 1 million views. The press keeps calling non-stop. You've become national news." Richard looked at his phone and saw dozens of missed calls and hundreds of messages. "What do they want?" "Interviews, mostly. They want to know more about Marcus's story and your decision to help him." Richard thought for a moment. The media attention could be positive for Marcus, but it could also be too invasive for an 8-year-old child. "Maestro," he turned to Harrington, "do you think it would be good for Marcus to appear in the media?" "In moderation, yes. The visibility could open important doors for his musical future. But we must protect the child's privacy." Richard nodded in agreement. "Jennifer, let's organize a press conference for tomorrow, but with clear rules. Questions only about music and education. Nothing invasive about Marcus's personal life." "Understood. And let's take the opportunity to officially announce the Music Education Fund." Marcus, who had returned to the piano, was playing a cheerful and lively tune, completely different from the melancholic pieces he had played before. It was as if all the joy in the world was flowing through his small hands. "Marcus," called Richard, "may I ask how you're feeling right now?" The boy stopped playing and smiled the biggest smile Richard had ever seen. "I feel like it's my birthday, Christmas, and Children's Day all at once, Mr. Richard." Everyone in the room laughed, swept up by the child's pure and genuine joy. "And you, Mrs. Tanya, how are you feeling?" "Mr. Richard, She struggled to find the words. All my life I worked hard to give Marcus the best I could, but I always knew it wasn't enough. I always knew he deserved more. I never imagined that one day—" Her voice broke. "Mrs. Tanya, Marcus deserves all this and much more, and now he'll have the opportunity to show his talent to the whole world." Maestro Harrington approached Marcus. "Marcus, may I ask you a question? What is your dream?" Marcus thought for a moment. "My dream is to play in a real orchestra with all those musicians playing together with me, and I wish my grandma could see it." "Is your grandmother very ill?" asked Richard. "Yes, sir. She has heart and lung problems. The doctor said she needs expensive medicine, but we don't have the money." Richard felt his chest tighten again. That family's life was a sequence of hardships he could hardly imagine. "Marcus, now that we have the education fund, we'll also be able to help with your grandmother's medicine." "Really? Really?" Marcus jumped off the piano bench and hugged Richard again, this time even tighter. "Mr. Richard, you're the best person in the world." Richard laughed, but internally he was reflecting on how far he was from being the best person in the world. Just hours ago he had yelled at that same boy, had publicly humiliated him, had shown the worst of himself. "Marcus, I need to apologize to you for how I treated you at the beginning." "You don't need to apologize, Mr. Richard. You were angry, it happens to everyone." The boy's simplicity and capacity for forgiveness impressed everyone present. "But I do need to, Marcus. It wasn't right for me to yell at you. You didn't do anything wrong." "But I crashed the toy car into the piano. It was an accident, and even if it wasn't, nothing justifies how I acted." Marcus smiled. "Then you're forgiven, Mr. Richard." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The rest of the afternoon flew by. Richard, with Jennifer and Maestro Harrington's help, began organizing the practical details of the Music Education Fund. They called instrument stores to choose a suitable piano for Marcus, contacted renowned music schools to discuss the study program, and started structuring the monthly financial support that would be given to the family. Meanwhile, Marcus kept playing, exploring different pieces and improvising his own melodies. Every piece he played seemed more impressive than the last. Around 5 in the afternoon, Richard realized they needed to figure out how to get Marcus back home. "Mrs. Tanya, how did you get here?" "By bus, Mr. Richard. It took 4 buses. 4 buses? Richard calculated the distance. That must have taken over 2 hours. 2.5 hours, sir. I rushed out of work when you called." Mrs. Cynthia was very understanding. Richard turned to Jennifer. "Jennifer, call the driver. We're taking Marcus and Mrs. Tanya home." "That's not necessary, Mr. Richard," protested Tanya. "We can take the bus back." "Absolutely not. Today you're going by car." During the drive to the South Bronx, Richard got a close look at the reality Marcus lived in. The streets became simpler as they moved away from the city center. The houses grew smaller and closer together, and it was possible to see the social differences he normally only saw through the windows of his Upper East Side apartment. "It's over there, Mr. Richard," pointed out Marcus as they neared his home. "The little blue house." The house was indeed small, but it was well kept. There was a small garden in front with some flowers, and the paint, though faded, was clean. "Marcus, the piano will arrive tomorrow morning," said Richard. "You need to choose where you want to put it." "Can it be in the living room, Mum?" "Of course it can, my son." "And Maestro Harrington will come here on Thursday to start the lessons." "He's coming here?" Marcus couldn't believe it. "Yes, he is. And on Fridays you'll have music theory lessons at the music school." "Mr. Richard," said Tanya, "how can I ever thank you for all this?" "No need to thank me, Mrs. Tanya. Just make sure Marcus makes the most of this opportunity." "You can be sure I will." When the car stopped in front of the house, an elderly lady appeared at the door, leaning on a cane. She was clearly Marcus's grandmother. "Grandma Margaret!" Marcus jumped out of the car and ran to hug his grandmother. "Grandma, something amazing happened." The elderly woman looked curiously at the luxury car parked in front of her humble home. "Marcus, who are these people?" Richard got out of the car and introduced himself. "Mrs. Margaret, my name is Richard Blackwell. Your grandson taught me a great lesson today." "A lesson?" He showed extraordinary musical talent, and now we're going to help him develop that talent." Mrs. Margaret looked at her grandson, then at Richard, trying to understand what was happening. "Marcus, tell Grandma what happened," asked Tanya. As Marcus excitedly told the whole story, Richard observed Mrs. Margaret. He could see in her eyes the same musicality that shone in her grandson's. Her hands, deformed by years of hard work, and the accident Marcus had mentioned, moved involuntarily as if they were playing piano while she listened to the story. "Mrs. Margaret," said Richard when Marcus finished, "Marcus told me that you were the one who taught him his first steps in music." "Oh, Mr. Richard," she shook her head. "I tried to teach him the little I knew, but my hands—" She looked sadly at her own hands. "They can't do what they used to do anymore." "Did you play professionally, Mom?" "A long time ago, sir. I played at church, gave private lessons. I even played in some important performances. But that was before Marcus was born." "And why did you stop, Mrs.?" Margaret showed her deformed hands. "I had an accident at the factory where I worked. I broke several bones in my right hand and lost a lot of mobility in my fingers. I never could play properly again." Richard felt a wave of admiration for the woman. Even without being able to play, she had passed her love for music on to her grandson. "Mrs. Margaret, tomorrow we're bringing a piano for Marcus. Would you like to try playing a few things?" The elderly woman's eyes filled with tears. "Mr. Richard, it's been over 15 years since I've played on a real piano. Then it's time to start playing again, even if it's just a little bit." "Grandma!" Marcus jumped excitedly. "We'll be able to play together." "Oh, my grandson!" Mrs. Margaret cried and smiled at the same time. "What joy!" Richard said goodbye to the family with the promise to return the next day to be there for the piano's arrival. During the trip back to the city center, he was silent, processing everything that had happened that day. "Richard," said Jennifer, "are you sure you want to do all this?" "Jennifer, when was the last time you saw me truly happy?" Jennifer thought for a moment. "It's been a long time, Richard, a very long time." "That's right. Today I felt truly happy, for the first time in years. Because of Marcus, because of everything, for having the opportunity to make a difference in that family's life, for discovering that there is still genuine goodness and talent in this world, for realizing that I was losing what really matters in life." Jennifer smiled. "You know this is going to cost a lot of money, right? Jennifer, my company makes millions per month, and for what? To buy more cars I don't use? More apartments I never visit? More watches that stay locked in the safe? And now? Now I've found something worth investing my money in." The next day, Richard arrived early at Marcus's house, accompanied by the truck carrying the piano. It was a semi-new, good-quality instrument that had cost $25,000. To Richard, it was the price of a weekend at a luxury resort. To Marcus's family, it was an unimaginable fortune. When the piano was placed in the small living room of the house, Marcus was speechless. He walked around the instrument, touching it delicately, as if it were made of crystal. "Is it really mine, Mr. Richard?" "It's all yours, Marcus." The boy sat on the bench and began to play the same piece he had composed the day before. But now, in the intimacy of his own home, with his family around him, the music sounded even more beautiful and moving. Mrs. Margaret approached the piano and, with her trembling, deformed hands, tried to play a few notes. The sound wasn't perfect, but you could hear the music that still existed inside her. "Grandma, let me help you," said Marcus, placing his small hands over his grandmother's. Together they managed to play a simple but beautiful melody. Richard watched the scene with teary eyes. He had never witnessed anything so genuinely beautiful. "Mrs. Margaret," he said, "would you like to attend Marcus's lessons?" "Can I really?" "Of course you can. In fact, Maestro Harrington said it would be very good to have someone from the family following Marcus's progress." "Oh, Mr. Richard, it will be like a dream." In the following days, Richard began to visit Marcus's family regularly. He wanted to closely follow the boy's progress and ensure everything was working well. Maestro Harrington was impressed with the speed at which Marcus absorbed musical knowledge. In a week, the boy was already reading basic sheet music. Within 2 weeks, he was playing pieces that normally took beginners months to master. "Mr. Richard," said Harrington after one of the lessons. "I've never seen anything like it. Marcus isn't learning music. He's just remembering things he already knew." "What do you mean?" "It's as if the music was already inside him, waiting to be discovered. I'm merely giving him the tools to express what already exists in his soul." Richard began to realize that his own life was changing too. Spending time with Marcus's family, seeing their genuine gratitude, being part of the development of an extraordinary talent, was filling a void he didn't even know existed. His daughter Rebecca, who had distanced herself from him years ago because of his difficult temperament and his obsession with money, got in touch after seeing Marcus's story in the press. "Dad, I saw on television what you did for that boy." "Rebecca." Richard was emotional hearing his daughter's voice after so long. "Dad, it was the first time in years that I felt proud of you." "Becky," he couldn't speak. "Can we meet? I want to talk to you. And I want to meet Marcus." Richard cried when he hung up the phone. His relationship with his daughter had deteriorated precisely because of his greed and his explosive temper. Now, his decision to help Marcus was bringing his daughter back. When Rebecca met Marcus 2 weeks later, she was immediately charmed by the boy. She was a preschool teacher and knew how to recognize special children. "Dad, Marcus isn't just musically talented. He's an exceptional child in every way." "What do you mean?" "See how he treats his mother and his grandmother, how grateful he is for everything, how he hasn't let this sudden life change go to his head. He's still the same humble, polite boy he always was." Richard watched Marcus play the piano for Rebecca and realized his daughter was right. Despite all the changes, the boy remained essentially the same. "Marcus," called Rebecca, "can I ask you a question?" "Sure, Aunt Rebecca." "What do you like most about your new life?" Marcus thought for a moment. "I like being able to play the piano every day, but what I like most is seeing my mother and my grandma happy. My mother doesn't cry from exhaustion when she gets home from work anymore, and my grandma can buy her medicine." Rebecca looked at Richard with teary eyes. "Dad, you saved this family." "No, Becky, they saved me." 3 months after their first meeting, Marcus gave his first official public performance. It was a benefit concert organized by Maestro Harrington at the Lincoln Center for the Performing Arts in New York. Richard invited all the executives who had witnessed Marcus's first moment playing the piano. Also present were several journalists, professional musicians, and influential people from the arts community. But for Marcus, the most important people in the audience were his mother, his grandmother, and Richard with Rebecca. When Marcus walked on stage, wearing a small suit that Richard had specially made for him, the silence in the theater was absolute. The boy sat at the grand piano and adjusted the bench with the same naturalness as an experienced pianist. The first piece he chose to play was his own composition from that very first day. But now, with 3 months of formal study, the piece had evolved, becoming more complex and moving. During the 45-minute performance, Marcus played a selection of classics and his own compositions that left the entire audience on its feet. Many people were crying openly, moved by the combination of the boy's pure talent and genuine humility. At the end, Marcus made a point of calling his grandmother to the stage. "This performance is especially for my grandma Margaret," he said into the microphone, his still childish voice contrasting with the musical maturity he had just demonstrated, "who taught me to love music even when she didn't have a piano to teach me on." Mrs. Margaret walked onto the stage leaning on her cane, crying with emotion. Marcus helped her sit at the piano, and together they played a simple but moving version of Ave Maria. The standing ovation that followed lasted over 10 minutes. Richard, from the audience, applauded with tears streaming down his face next to the daughter he had regained thanks to that special child. After the concert, Marcus was surrounded by journalists and admirers, but he always answered questions with the same humility and simplicity as always. "Marcus, how do you feel being called a prodigy?" asked a journalist. "I don't know what a prodigy is," he answered sincerely, "but I feel very happy to be able to play music for people." "And what are your plans for the future?" "I want to keep studying music, and when I grow up, I want to play in many places so more people can hear beautiful music." "Do you have any message for other kids who have dreams like yours?" Marcus thought carefully before answering. I think everyone has something special inside them. Sometimes we don't know what it is, but it's there. And when we discover it, we have to work very hard to make that special thing grow. Richard heard the answer and smiled. Even at just 8 years old, Marcus had a wisdom that many adults lacked. After the concert, there was a small intimate party at Marcus's house. Richard had hired a catering service, and the whole neighborhood was invited. It was important to him that the community where Marcus lived shared in that special moment. "Mr. Richard," said Mrs. Margaret, approaching him during the party, "I wanted to thank you once again for everything you've done for our family." "Mrs. Margaret, I've already said that I'm the one who should be thanking you. But I want you to know that Marcus hasn't changed at all because of all this. He's still the same good, polite boy he always was." "I know, Mrs. Margaret, and that's the most important thing. Mr. Richard, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why did you decide to help us, even after being rude to Marcus at first?" Richard thought about the question. It was something he had asked himself many times over the past few months. "Mrs. Margaret, I think I was lost. I had become a person I didn't like. Bitter, always angry, focused only on making money. When I saw Marcus's talent, and especially when I saw his humility and kindness even after I had been cruel to him, I realized there was still hope for me. I realized I could use my wealth for something truly important. And now, how do you feel?" "Now I feel alive again, Mrs. Margaret. I hadn't felt a purpose in my life for a long time." "You know you've changed our entire lives, right? And you've changed mine too." Mrs. Margaret smiled and squeezed Richard's deformed hand. "It's a good thing God put Marcus in your path that day." Richard agreed. It really did seem like it had been fate. 6 months later, Marcus was studying at one of the best music schools in the country, in addition to private lessons with Maestro Harrington. His progress was phenomenal, and he had already received invitations to play in various cities across the United States. Richard made it a routine to visit the family at least twice a week. He became not just Marcus's sponsor, but a true friend to the family. Tanya had gotten a better job, working only during the day, and could be more involved in her son's studies. Mrs. Margaret's health had stabilized thanks to the medication she could now take regularly. But the most significant change had happened to Richard himself. His company continued to prosper, but now he worked with a different purpose. Part of the profits were allocated not only for Marcus's education, but also for a broader program supporting talented children from underprivileged communities. Rebecca had rekindled a close relationship with her father and often accompanied him on visits to Marcus's family. "Dad, have you noticed how you've changed?" she said during one of these visits. "Changed how?" "You smile more, you have more patience, you care about people." Richard reflected on his daughter's words. He truly had changed, and the change had begun the moment he decided to turn his anger into opportunity. 1 year after their first meeting, Marcus gave a special concert to celebrate his 9th birthday. This time, the event was held in the concert hall of Richard's company, which had been specially adapted for musical performances. During the concert, Marcus played a composition he had created especially for the occasion. He dedicated it to Uncle Richard, who taught me that sometimes the most beautiful things in life are born from the most difficult moments. Richard cried upon hearing the dedication. He remembered that moment a year ago when he had yelled at Marcus over a simple accident with the water cart. He could never have imagined that moment of anger would turn into the most meaningful experience of his life. After the concert, Marcus approached Richard. "Uncle Richard, can I ask you something?" "Of course, Marcus." "Are you still mad at me for bumping the cart into your piano?" Richard laughed and hugged the boy. "Marcus, that was the best accident of my life." "Why?" "Because that's how I met you, and meeting you was the best thing that ever happened to me." Marcus smiled his radiant smile. "Uncle Richard, do you want me to compose a special song for you?" "I would love that, Marcus." "Then I'll make a song called The Good Businessman." Richard chuckled. "The Good Businessman? Are you sure I deserve that title?" "I'm sure," Marcus replied with childish conviction. "You are the best businessman in the whole world." In that moment, Richard realized he had gained something far more valuable than any business contract or financial profit. He had gained the genuine affection of an extraordinary child. He had rebuilt his relationship with his daughter, and most importantly, he had rediscovered the man he truly wanted to be. 2 years after their first meeting, Marcus, now 10 years old, had become a minor national celebrity. His performances sold out theaters, and he had recorded his first album, with half the compositions being his own creations. But despite the success, Marcus remained the same humble and caring boy he had always been. Richard made sure fame didn't change the child's character, and the whole family worked to keep Marcus grounded. "Uncle Richard," Marcus said during one visit, "I wanted to tell you something." "What is it, Marcus?" "Remember that day when you said you'd give me your company if I played the piano?" "Yes, I remember." "Well, I was thinking, you kind of did give me your company, didn't you?" Richard was curious. "How so?" "Well, you used the company's money to take care of me, my mom, and my grandma. You pay for my studies, our new apartment, grandma's medicine. It's like part of the company is really mine." Richard smiled. Marcus's simple yet precise logic impressed him. "You're right, Marcus. In a way, you really have become my most important partner. So does that mean I'm a businessman too?" "A little businessman, yes." Marcus was thoughtful for a moment. "Uncle Richard, if I'm a businessman, then I can help other kids too, right?" "What do you mean? Do you?" "There are many kids at my old school who have talents but no money to develop them. Can I use my share of the company to help them too?" Richard felt immense pride in the boy. Even so young, Marcus was already thinking about using his opportunities to help others. "Of course you can, Marcus. In fact, I think it's a fantastic idea." That was how the Little Big Talents project was born, an initiative Marcus created together with Richard to identify and support talented children from underprivileged communities. The first beneficiary was Jaden, a 7-year-old boy from Marcus's old school who drew with impressive skill. "Uncle Richard," Marcus said the day they met Jaden, "did you see how he draws? It's just like my piano. His talent is waiting for someone to help it grow." Richard watched Marcus explain to Jaden what his own experience had been like, encouraging the younger boy, promising they would get professional drawing materials and lessons with good teachers. In that moment, Richard was absolutely certain that his decision to support Marcus had been far more important than just developing an extraordinary musical talent. He had helped shape an exceptional human being who was now multiplying the kindness he had received. 3 years after that first meeting, Richard was in his office when Jennifer came in with extraordinary news. "Richard, a letter arrived for Marcus. It's from Vienna." "From Vienna?" "From the Vienna Conservatory of Music. They're offering Marcus a full scholarship to study there when he turns 15. Richard was speechless. The Vienna Conservatory was one of the most prestigious music institutions in the world. They saw Marcus's performances on YouTube and were impressed. They want him to do an audition by video conference. Richard felt a mix of pride and worry. On one hand, it was international recognition of Marcus's talent. On the other, it meant the boy would have to leave his family in the United States. When they shared the news with Marcus and his family, the reaction was one of emotion and nervousness. "Is Vienna very far away?" asked Marcus. "It's on the other side of the world, my son," replied Tanya, clearly worried. "But it's a unique opportunity, Marcus," explained Richard. "The greatest pianists in the world studied there." Marcus became thoughtful. "Uncle Richard, if I go to Vienna, will you be able to visit us there?" "Of course I will, Marcus." "And can my mom and my grandma come with me?" Richard smiled. Even when faced with an international opportunity, Marcus's first concern was for his family. "Marcus, if you decide to go, we'll find a way for the whole family to stay together." The video conference audition was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Marcus prepared intensely, choosing a repertoire that mixed traditional classics and his own compositions. On the day of the audition, the whole family was gathered in the living room of Marcus's house, which was now larger and more comfortable thanks to Richard's support. The piano occupied a central position, and the computer screen showed 3 serious teachers from the conservatory, connected from Vienna. "Marcus Williams," said one of them in English, which Marcus had begun to learn, "we are eager to hear you." Marcus began with a piece by Chopin, performed with the technical perfection and emotional maturity that had become his trademark. Then he played one of his own compositions, a melancholic and beautiful piece he had created, thinking about how much he would miss his family if he went to Vienna. The Austrian teachers remained silent during both performances, their serious expressions revealing nothing about what they were thinking. When Marcus finished, the silence lasted for a few seconds that seemed to last forever. Finally, one of the professors said, "Marcus, in 50 years of teaching piano, I have never heard anything like what we just witnessed." Richard quickly translated for the family. "We would very much like to have you as our student, but we would also like to meet your family, who clearly played a fundamental role in shaping the exceptional young man you have become." Marcus smiled and called his mother and grandmother to appear on the screen. "This is my mother Tanya and my grandma Margaret," he said in English, with the Brazilian accent that charmed the professors. "It's a pleasure to meet you," said one of the professors. "Marcus, our offer is this. You can come study with us when you turn 15, and we can help your family settle in Vienna during your studies." Really? Marcus couldn't believe it. Really, talent like yours deserves all the support possible. After the video conference, the family talked about the proposal. It was a difficult decision that would change everyone's lives. "What do you all think?" asked Marcus. "Son, it's you who has to decide," said Tanya. "We will support any choice you make." "Uncle Richard, what do you think?" Richard thought carefully before answering. "Marcus, this is an opportunity that very few people in the world receive. If you really want to be a professional pianist at an international level, studying in Vienna can open doors we can't even imagine." "But what about our project here in the United States and the other kids we're helping?" Richard smiled. Even in the face of an extraordinary personal opportunity, Marcus was thinking of others. "The project will continue, Marcus, and when you return graduated from the most famous conservatory in the world, you will be able to help even more children." Marcus nodded, but still seemed torn. "Can I think a little more?" "Of course you can. There's no rush." 2 weeks later, Marcus made his decision. "Uncle Richard, I want to go to Vienna," he announced during a dinner at the family's home. "But only if we can keep helping the kids here, even from afar." "Of course we can, Marcus. We can do benefit concerts in Vienna, raise money there too for the project." "And you promise you'll visit us often?" "I promise. And you can also come to the United States during vacations." Marcus smiled his radiant smile. "Then let's go to Vienna." The news of Marcus's acceptance to the Vienna Conservatory became a national headline. Newspapers, magazines, and television shows told the story of the boy who had gone from the outskirts of New York City to conquer one of the most prestigious music institutions in the world. But for Richard, the most important news wasn't in the papers. It was in the call he received from Rebecca. "Dad, did you see the interview Marcus gave yesterday?" "Yes, I did, Becky." "Did you hear when they asked him who the most important person in his life was?" Richard had heard and had been moved by the answer. "He said it was you, Dad. He said you were the first person who believed in him and that you changed the whole family's life." "Becky, Marcus is the one who changed my life." "Dad, do you realize what you two have created together? A story that is inspiring people all over the United States. How many people are now looking at underprivileged children differently because of Marcus's story?" Richard hadn't thought of that, but Rebecca was right. His and Marcus's story had become a symbol of hope and social transformation. "Dad, I'm so proud of the man you've become." Richard cried upon hearing those words. Having his daughter's respect and affection back was a priceless gift. 4 years after their first meeting, the time came for farewell. Marcus, now 12 years old, was ready to leave for Vienna, along with his mother and grandmother. At the airport, there were dozens of people to say goodbye. Fellow music school students, children helped by the Little Big Talents project, neighbors from the community where Marcus had grown up, executives from Richard's company, journalists, and of course Richard and Rebecca. "Uncle Richard," said Marcus, hugging Richard for the last time before boarding, "thank you so much for everything. Marcus, I'm the one who should thank you for teaching me what really matters in life. Are you really going to visit us in Vienna?" Yes, I am, and when you graduate, we'll do a special performance here in the United States. Absolutely, Marcus smiled. And Uncle Richard? Yes, that day when you yelled at me, it was the best day of my life. Why, Marcus? Because it was the day I met you, and you became the best uncle in the world. Richard couldn't hold back his tears. He hugged Marcus one more time, knowing he was saying a temporary goodbye to someone who had become much more than a protege. He had become like a son. When the plane took off, Richard watched until it disappeared into the sky. Rebecca held her father's hand. Dad, you saved that kid. No, Becky, he saved me. 5 years passed. Marcus, now 17, had become one of the most brilliant students in the history of the Vienna Conservatory. His performances in Europe packed theatres, and he had recorded 3 albums that achieved international success. But Marcus never forgot his roots. He regularly sent money to the Little Big Talents project, which had expanded and was now helping hundreds of children across the United States. Richard kept his promise to visit the family in Vienna at least 3 times a year. It was always emotional to see Marcus growing and developing, but always maintaining the humility and kindness that had characterized him since childhood. The previous Christmas, Marcus had returned to the United States for a series of special performances. The homecoming concert was held at the same Lincoln Center, where he had given his first official performance 7 years earlier. Richard was in the front row as always, but this time he wasn't alone. Rebecca was by his side, along with her husband and their 2 small children. The family had come together again, and Marcus was an important part of that reunion. During the concert, Marcus played a new composition, which he had created especially for that homecoming performance. In the middle of the music, he stopped and addressed the audience. This piece is dedicated to my Uncle Richard, who 8 years ago taught me that it doesn't matter how a story begins. What matters is how it develops and how it ends. The ovation was deafening. Richard cried openly, proud of the extraordinary young man Marcus had become. After the concert, there was a small celebration at the family's favorite restaurant. Marcus, now a tall and elegant young man, but with the same bright eyes and the same warm smile of the child Richard had met, toasted with everyone present. "Uncle Richard," he said, "thank you for keeping your promise." "What promise, Marcus?" "Remember that day when you said you'd give me your company if I played the piano?" Richard laughed. "Yes, I remember." "Well, you ended up giving it to me after all. Not the whole company, but something much better. You gave me the chance at a life I could never have imagined." "Marcus, you earned all this with your talent and dedication. But if you hadn't believed in me that day, none of this would have happened." Richard reflected on Marcus's words. Truly, that whole incredible story had started with a moment of anger that turned into opportunity. "Marcus, can I confess something to you?" "Of course, Uncle Richard." "That day when you played the piano in my office for the first time, I cried because I remembered my son." Marcus was curious. Richard had never spoken about this before. "Did you have a son?" "I do. His name is Michael, but we haven't spoken in a long time." "Why?" "Because I was a bad father. Always working, always in a bad mood, always putting money ahead of family. He got tired and distanced himself from me. And now I'm trying to find him. I want to ask for forgiveness. I want to show him that I've changed." Marcus smiled. "Uncle Richard, if you manage to find your son, you can tell him I said you're the kindest man I know, and that if he gives you a chance, he won't regret it." Richard was moved by Marcus's words. "Do you think he'll forgive me?" "I'm sure, Uncle Richard, because you've truly changed. Anyone who spends time with you can see that." 2 weeks later, Richard finally found his son. Michael lived in San Diego, was married, had 2 children, and worked as a veterinarian. When Richard called him, the conversation was tense at first. "Dad, it's been so long. Michael, I know you don't want to talk to me, but I need to ask for your forgiveness." "Dad, no, let me speak. I was a terrible father. I put work ahead of family. I was never present in your life, and when you tried to get close, I was always too busy." Michael was silent on the other end of the line. "But Michael, I've changed. I've learned what really matters in life, and I really want you back in my life." How have you changed, Dad? Richard told the whole story of Marcus, from the first meeting up to now. Michael listened in silence. Dad, I saw that story on television, but I never imagined it had affected you so personally. Michael, that boy taught me to be a better man, and now I want to be a better father too. For you, and for my grandchildren whom I haven't even met yet. Michael cried on the phone. Dad, I always wanted to have you around, but you seem not to care. I did care, Michael. I just didn't know how to show it. But now I do. Dad, I want to get to know you again. I want my children to know their grandfather. Richard cried with joy. Marcus had brought his daughter back, and now he was bringing his son back too. 6 months later, Richard's family was together for the first time in over 10 years. Michael had come from San Diego with his wife and children to spend a week in New York City. Richard made sure to introduce his grandchildren to Marcus, who was on break from the conservatory. Children, Richard said to his 6- and 8-year-old grandchildren, this is Marcus who changed Grandpa's life. Are you the one who plays piano? Asked the younger one. I do, replied Marcus, smiling. Can you play a song for us? Marcus sat at the piano in Richard's house and played a cheerful, fun melody that made the children clap and smile. Michael watched the scene and approached Richard. Dad, now I understand why this boy is so special to you. Why? Because he has something rare these days, pure kindness. It's impossible not to be charmed by him. Richard agreed. Even after all these years of success and fame, Marcus remained the same genuine and caring person he had met in the office. During that special week, Richard organized a dinner to celebrate the family reunion. Present were Rebecca with her husband and children, Michael with his wife and children, and Marcus with Tanya and Mrs. Cynthia, who had returned from Vienna especially for the occasion. I'd like to make a toast, said Richard, raising his glass, to this family that formed in an unusual way, but became real through everyone's love and dedication. And especially, added Marcus, to Uncle Richard, who turned a bad day into the most beautiful thing in our lives. Everyone toasted, and Richard felt a complete happiness he hadn't experienced in decades. The end of the story. And so, dear listener, what did you think of this touching story? Let us know in the comments which moment moved you the most, and whether you believe in the transformative power of music and kindness. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories.